Working.
Dudes. How are you, mate?
Good, buddy. You?
Well, still alive, fella. Just.
Right, we got to another end of another season, though, mate. We've made it.
Yeah, loved it, mate.
Good.
Let's give it a couple more minutes for any stragglers.
Excuse me.
Just for anyone who came in after I asked, if you haven't already done so, please just sign in on the chat with your name and name of your club.
Chat.
Okay, we're a couple of minutes on, so I think we'll get started. If anyone else arrives, we can bring them in as and when. This is round 4 for some of us. You'll probably take us just over 8 hours of Zoom video by the end of the week. Just on that point, can just ask everyone to mute, please. In fact, I'll do it for you. I'll mute everyone. And if you would like to speak at any point, if you wouldn't mind just raising an electronic hand, that's the easiest way for me to spot you, because that shows you to the top left of my screen, or wave frantically at the screen and hopefully I'll see you, but I've got you split onto 2 screens now, so I may miss you. So if you just click the electronic hand, we'll get to you in the order they come up. Yeah, so as I say, this is round 4 for us. We've done 3 sessions, 2 last week, one last night. Reasonably well attended and lots of feedback on various issues. The videos for the first 3 are already up. First 2 were, I put out the links for them yesterday. I'll put the link for tonight's and yesterday's up tomorrow. So you can have a look and see what everybody else was saying, see if it concurs with the swell of opinion in this one. I'd like to start, if that's okay, with just a bit of general feedback on how clubs felt the season went. Obviously, big season. It's the first one for the 2 leagues being together. Lots of new stuff for the ex-OCA clubs, bit of new stuff for the ex-CCL clubs, and a lot of new players to play. So just want to get some general feedback, what you thought about how it went, how we communicated with you, any thoughts on the website, that kind of thing. Good or bad, we prefer good, but you know, if you've got any constructive negative comments, then we want to hear those as well, because if we did make any mistakes, we'd like to try and eradicate them. Tom, the first one with a hand up, so you'd like to kick us off?
Yeah, I think from Oxford Downs' point of view, I think we want to just say thanks to all of you guys on the committee for organising it. We ran a fourth team for the first time this year, and the effect of having the OCA clubs in, and the fact that those guys, the most they travelled was about 15-20 minutes down the road. It was fantastic. So I think from our club, there's one point we want to raise a bit later on that we would like people to consider. But overall, really fantastic season. Really glad we've had the OCA clubs in, and yeah, thanks to all of you guys for the massive amount of work that went into organising it.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Anyone else like to have a go? Okay. We could be on for the shortest meeting of the four.
I think
Okay.
Daniel's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Daniel, crack. Oh, yeah, sorry, your electronic hand has just sort of paled into something about the same colour in your background. Sorry about that.
I've selected myself a white hand, I think, rather than a dark or a
Yes,
yellow one.
possibly.
I don't know how I've done that. Just thank you very much for welcoming those of us in the OCA into the Charwell League. It's been interesting. It's lovely playing new clubs. Actually, I've been playing cricket for 30 years, and so nice to go to some new grounds. There are very few of the Charwell League rules that I have any time for at all, and I'm finding win, lose, draw baffling. But we'll get onto that in a bit, I'm sure. But as a whole, we did actually do an official poll of our club, and people have been very happy this year and have enjoyed their cricket. And we've had like Oxford Downs, we've had 4 teams for the first time, running 2 grounds for the first time. So it's been a hectic year.
Okay, good. Thanks for that.
Yeah, from Sunnington. Are we okay to talk now?
Yeah, crack on. Yeah.
Yeah, from Sunnington's point of view, having obviously joined up at the start of the season, really pleased to have been involved this year. We're very much happy with how the season's gone, and grateful for sort of being welcomed in so well. And me personally, sort of starting off as secretary with the learning curve already and the new stuff to learn, I felt it to be sort of very manageable, and the answers have been available if we've had any questions and such like, and subject to the odd sort of recurring kind of bit of feedback that will probably come back in later topics. We as a club have been really happy to have been welcomed in, and well matched games generally, and all the things that really matter have been positive from our point of view. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else want to chip in at this point, or are you keeping your powder dry for later? Okay. We'll move into one of the more specific areas, and that was regionalisation. Now, we have had 1 or 2 bits of input, I'd say probably minority, but about perhaps having less regionalisation in order to increase the variety of clubs that they might play against. So perhaps bringing it down from 3 divisions in a tier to 2. We've also had people suggest that we should have more. We should maybe have 4 divisions in a tier. We felt that 3 from 5 down was about right, but that was we didn't really have the opportunity at that time to do extensive polling of the clubs. Are we generally happy with the regionalised nature? Or do we think it needs tweaking in any way?
Hi, Nigel, Sunningwell Cricket Club.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi. I personally think 30 teams is too many in a tier, especially when you consider teams that will get perhaps promoted, the difference between playing the top team next season and the bottom team this season may be 60 places difference.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that is how different that 60 places are. We'll find out next year, I guess. But I personally I would rather travel an extra 10, 15 minutes and have a better game of cricket than going somewhere either being run over or running them over. That's my view. But yeah, that's my own personal view.
Yeah, I mean, when we started looking at this, we were acutely aware that there is a balance to be had between playing locally and playing or locally geographically and locally at your level, if you like. So
yeah,
wherever you put it, there might be an argument to sway one way or the other. But yeah, the points taken on board. Yeah.
I think, like I said, the 30 teams or the 10 teams we played this year, I would say have been very similar in standard. Just like I said, it's when you get that promotion, how big is that jump going to be? Like, I wouldn't like to see the majority of teams that get promoted this year get relegated next year.
If I can just hopefully assuage some of that worry, I played in Tier 6 this year. I'm looking at your division, which you obviously romped, and there are teams in there who finished just below us in what was the old Division 8. And we would consider games against them to be as competitive as some of the ones that we had this year. So I don't think you'll see a huge difference, and I think it will even out over the next year or two. But I mean, there are a team that finished 8th in your division. We played the year before, and I think they might have even beaten us on one occasion, although we finished higher ultimately in Division 8. So I wouldn't be too concerned about, certainly the jumps between 6, 7 and 8, I suspect, are probably less than the jump between 3 and 4, certainly 3 and 2 might be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's maybe the fear of the unknown, perhaps, rather than.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, no, down from 5.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, sorry, Neil, I'll come to you just a second. One of the reasons for fairly extensive promotions this year was that we wanted to give teams the opportunity to balance out, because since we last ranked all the teams, we've been gone for 2 years, and we know that a lot can change in one closed season, let alone 2. And B, we knew the Cherwell League clubs quite well, and the OCA guys knew the OCA clubs quite well, but neither knew the other clubs that well, so we were never quite sure who we were putting together. So we wanted to allow a reasonable amount of movement between the divisions for the first couple of years in order to let that settle. And I think 2-3 years on, we'll know the truth of that, and it may be that, crikey, yeah, you win your tier, you're in for a pounding the next year, or it may be that you would expect to finish mid or higher up in the table, but we'll see. But I totally accept your point. I mean, we did discuss this at the beginning, that when you put 30 tiers in a team, there is a potential 58 team gap once somewhere. But yeah, so sorry, Neil, you had your hand up, and Daniel, I'll come up to you. I think you're on mute, Neil.
Because you're still on mute.
On mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Any better?
That's it.
Yeah.
There, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry, guys. Just a techno muppet, I'm afraid. We come at it from a very different angle at Banbury. We've been consistent all the way through. We're completely against regional cricket at any level, frankly. We want to play at the best grounds, not the nearest grounds. If the nearest ones are the best ones, great, then fine. That's a bonus. But we're against it. We know why it's there, and certainly at the bottom end, that's probably fair enough. Pitching these divisions has been really difficult. I think the league have done a really good job in many respects. Our third team, which I'm involved with, we ended up in 4B, and we've been pretty competitive in that all season. We've played a lot of OCA Div 1 teams from the previous season. And it's been good competitive cricket as far as I can see. And there's not been a massive amount between all the teams. But like the guy from Sunningwell said, you don't want, I think teams would be bored out of their minds 5 years down the road if we're playing the same teams within a 10-mile radius. That's our pitch on it. I want to go to Challow and Childrey and Longmarston, these wonderful grounds that teams, unless they get to the absolute top end, are never going to experience. And that was what the Charwell League was always about years ago. I know things have changed now, of course they have. But we've chucked regional cricket out tomorrow if we had a choice, but I think we're the only club in the league that actually thinks that. So I know we're in a minority of Uno there, but no, it's been good. 4B's been pretty good, I would say. And it's been good fun. And yeah, onwards.
Okay. Thanks, Neil. Daniel, you were next up.
Yeah, we've got teams in divisions 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it's given us a really, really good view of what it's like between the different divisions, because we're all quite tightly together. And I'd say with the exception of 8, there's not that much between them. And we have an interesting position of having 2 teams being promoted, which means that our first and second team are going to be playing in the same division next year, unless obviously things get rejigged. The question is, how many other clubs are in that situation? And what are we supposed to do about it?
Okay. All right, let's deal with that now. It'll probably come up a little bit later. Fortunately, because of where you are geographically, you're not out on a limb at the far east or the far west of the region. You won't be playing in the same division. You will, one of your teams will be heading in one direction most weeks, and the other one will be heading in a different direction most weeks. We still have to have a chat about whether there is anything we need to do to regulate players between year 1s and 2s, but I suspect probably not. I think they'll be subject to the same restrictions as every club are in weeks 17 and 18, where you can't play players down.
So the problem I've got as chair,
yeah,
is I've got a first team captain, a second team captain, both of whom, let's be honest, could play in the same team as each other, no problem at all. Mm-hmm. If the second team, just by fluke, ends up in a slightly more winnable division than the first team, and we're not talking about week 17 and 18 here, we're going to learn that pretty early on. Mm-hmm. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to divert resources and make the second team the team we concentrate on.
Sure. Cool.
I mean, how cool, that's true. But are we going to have nominated players? Is the question I suppose I get to.
No, I mean, the rules as they were set out following the amalgamation do say there will, however, be restriction on movement of players between the 2 teams. And in this instance, clubs actually have the option to decline the offer of promotion. But we, as Ian said, we haven't really progressed that, and I don't think there'll be too many restrictions. It's up to you to. So the only thing I would say is, if one of those teams, whichever one it was, got promoted the year after and one didn't, that would be your first team the year after.
Sure.
Because otherwise it would make no sense at all.
That much is clear.
Yeah. But no, I don't think we see really much difference. I mean, it's up to you to potentially think about when you prioritise one or the other, or both.
Now, obviously, I hear rumours we're getting 12 new teams joining. Does that mean? Well, does that mean that the league might stretch, and we might find that you might use log jams like we've got as a way of stretching it to slip in another division?
Okay. Well, I was going to come to that around.
Okay, sorry, I'm preempting you. I apologise.
No, it's okay. No, you've brought it up. Let's get it out there. We've had 7 applications, and these come in 2 forms: 2 brand new clubs to the league, and 3 clubs that want to add an additional team in the league. Now, when clubs add additional teams, we don't even take that to the AGM for election, as long as we're satisfied with the club as it's set up and we're happy with the ground. We don't see any reason why they shouldn't be allowed to bring an extra team in. So those 3 are definitely confirmed. The other 2 will be subject to election at the AGM. They've both got nominators and seconders from within the league already. We've done all our due diligence on them. Their grounds are more than adequate. Their clubs are well constructed. Their constitutions are robust, etc., etc. So the committee will recommend to the meeting that we accept them, but ultimately it will be up to the clubs. Now, we have had situations in the past in the Charwell League where there's been an influx in, and it does cause all manner of concern, particularly at the lower divisions, because you can't put all these teams in at the bottom because they would make a mockery of it. So we have to put them in at an appropriate level, which means that by the time you get down to the bottom divisions, you might be relegating 12 or 13 teams in order to make space for them. So what we're proposing to do this year is we are going to add another division to tier 3. We will then promote up to fill tier 3, and that will then create space in the middle of the leagues so that we can fit these teams in various places. We will not, however, have to breach the promise that we made at the start of the season that 3 teams would be promoted from every league, from every division. So there will be a minimum of 3 promoted. In some cases it will be 4, and in one case it will actually be 6, but that's not really a promotion, it's more a reconstruction. The upside for everyone is that we now expect to be in a position where only the bottom team in every division in the league will be relegated. So it will be 3 minimum up, in some cases 4, 1 down. And I think when we looked at the tables at the end of the season, it was, and this was totally by luck, not judgment, but there was 1 team woefully adrift in every division bar 1. There was one who was maybe only 15, 20 points behind the next club. Almost every division, the bottom team was 40, 50 plus points adrift. And several of them had already got in touch with us and said, please, please, however you reconstruct, make sure you relegate us. We do not want to go through that season again. And, you know, we understand that. But in most of those divisions, the next team up actually was only perhaps 5 points from the next one and 10 points from the one after that. And so it would have been, they would have felt not aggrieved, but unlucky to have been relegated. So we've got, as I say, more by luck than judgment, but we've got a situation now where we can promote every team that we suggested we would, and a few more, and relegate only 1 from each division throughout. And now we won't be able to do this every year because there are only so many extra divisions we can put into place. And it has to be said, the league is attracting a lot of attention from outside, from clubs wanting to come in. Having seen the 2 divisions come together, perhaps spoken to some of the clubs in the leagues, and thought, yeah, we'd like a shot at that. And the 2 that we've accepted were 2 of, I think, about 4 or 5 that actually applied, and the other ones we said, one of them, I think geography was just too far off. A couple of the others we said, your ground facilities are not ready yet for the standard you'd want to play at. So we're not accepting all and sundry. They still have to meet the requirements, but that's how we're looking to progress. The logjam, Daniel, that you mentioned, there is a potential for it. There are a lot of clubs in there now with 3-4 teams. At the moment, I don't think we want to try and cross too many bridges until we get to them, but at the moment we're looking at the basis that apart from the bottom tier, we would not allow one club to have 2 teams in the same division. And we don't want to handcuff you too much in terms of nominated players, because if you nominate 15 for the ones and 6 of them for whatever reason are not available, and they say, well, actually more for the 2s, for example, and we're saying, oh, well, you can't, you've got 15 available ones, but you can't drop them down, and suddenly week 6 and you can't offer someone cricket. Or you say, well, we're going to drop to 3s then, which doesn't make any sense either. So we still have to confirm, and I think if there are any issues, we'll come back and talk to you individually as a club, because you're the only one at the moment that has that conundrum. But I think the general feeling at the minute is we wouldn't want to restrict you any more than we restrict anyone else. And as you say, it'll be your call. You'll look at one of the divisions and say, we can get out of that one, but I don't think we're going to get out of that one. So let's make that our focus.
That's very reassuring. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Anyone else want to chip in on regionalisation? Okay.
Yeah, Ian.
Oh, yeah,
Tim from Tame. How you doing?
Hi, Tim. Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, no, I guess is that if there's three kind of leagues in each division, I guess, then in terms of regionalisation, would the league kind of look at maybe, and to get a little bit of variety from one year to the next, is maybe move teams within that division across those three different kind of leagues? I guess that could be an option, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to bring anybody up or take anybody down to get that variety. You can move across almost, and I guess that could be something which clubs can have a conversation with you guys about, and then also other clubs going into that division, you can liaise with them in terms of regionalisation. But I'm guessing that yes, it's a great idea to start off, and I think this season's been a real success. So congrats to you guys on that. But I do think teams will want to kind of play different teams and kind of not get into kind of the status quo. But I think with those three divisions in each league, I think you've got the option there to cross, to move teams across to kind of cater for that. I think
that's absolutely the case. Otherwise, of course, if you do relegate somebody from 5A to 5 to 6A and so on, within 4 years, you probably haven't got regionalised divisions anymore, of course, because you don't know who's going to be at the top and who's going to be at the bottom. So we've already looked at restructuring. So you might end up, if you're in 5A, you might be in 5C, because that's regionally, that's better. So that ability, and Neil touched on it a little bit earlier, that ability to be still playing other clubs. I mean, if you looked at a team in an equivalent division to you and think, I can never play that team, well, that's not actually the case. There is possibilities. Yeah. Obviously, the regionalisation depends on who wins and who loses. Some divisions were much, much better than this year. And I think obviously, it sounds like Oxford Downs had a really good division for their fourth team. Some of them weren't quite as great because of the geography of the league. But we will always look and try and optimise those once the promotion and relegation candidates are identified.
Yeah, Gary, and I think from a players' feedback, a few people have kind of said we miss going to this location. I wouldn't want to kind of turn around and say, oh, you're never going to play there again, because I think people do like it.
Yeah, and I agree. And I made that point actually when we were having these discussions, which was this time last year. It'd be a real shame if you thought, well, they're in a parallel tier, parallel division stream to me. I can never play there again. And that isn't the case. I mean, geographically, it may be that those outliers, you're far less likely to go, but the geography also dictates that some people still have to go to those outlying regions. And if there's only 4 teams in that direction, another 6 have to go there to make a division of 10. So, yes. So, there's nobody's ruled out of playing anybody else, in fact, as we start, and we will try and reasonably optimise it each year if possible.
But there is a great level of variety anyway with the OCA teams coming in, and I think everybody really enjoyed the OCA teams coming in. It's, again, they're new teams coming in and new experiences, new grounds and things like that. New approach actually in sometimes in certain kind of circumstances, which is really refreshing as well. So, although regionalised this year, a lot of variety as well with the OCA teams coming in as well. So I thought that worked really well.
The initial draft for next season, which still needs a bit of confirmation, the way we've done it is take the 30 teams in the tier, pin them to a Google map, and then do the regionalisation as best suited to those 30 teams. So, as Gary suggested, you're not siloed in the Northeastern Division. If there's only one team in the Northeastern Division, and there is Pete's on the call, Long Marston are going to be doing a little bit of travelling this year. But the lines will be drawn according to that division. Now, to some extent, if you're us at Ledler Ridge, the chances of you playing Shipton or Cropredy would suggest that the regionalisation is not working that well, so that it's pretty unlikely, although not impossible. But there will be plenty of opportunity for variety, and already when I looked at some of the divisions, I've put them together and then put what division they were in the previous season. and there's one division that has teams from A, B, and C in it from the previous season. So there is a degree of mixing going on. Anyone else on regions? No. Okay, let's move on slightly different direction. Cups. Now, obviously, for the Chairman League clubs, the cups were a completely new phenomenon. Not so much for the OCA. There's a couple of things we wanted to touch on here. Just general feedback, general thoughts on cups going forward, and also the possibility of putting a cup in place for tier 1 and 2 teams, which we didn't have this season. Any thoughts on cups?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, it's me, Mike Roberts.
Hello, Mike.
Hiya. When would we propose these games be played, and would they then therefore take place on Saturdays in the whole end of the season be pushed back, or would they just be Sundays?
No, they wouldn't be on Saturdays, that's for sure.
Yeah, that might prove difficult for some of our players to play because they play elsewhere on Sundays.
Okay.
And also the time, obviously, giving up an extra day might not be very popular with family members. So we're nonplussed about cups at Twyford.
Okay, thank you. Bill.
We played, Banbury Thirds played in the Airy Cup this year. It's the first time in, I don't know, 100 years, 120 years that we played in it. We drew Swifts in the first round. It was absolutely brilliant game of cricket. It was incredibly difficult for us to get a team onto the field with the restrictions on how many players had played in second team cricket. And the rules are absolutely right. They're there. It's difficult for third teams to be competing in that competition, as we found out. So we were dragging back old boys and all sorts of players. And we had the best social day we've had all season, if I'm honest. We lost a reasonably close game to Swifts. It was brilliant. And the format was good. We loved it. The club loved it. And obviously there's just it's difficult with third teams where to pitch them in the competitions. I appreciate that. And we had two players that on the Saturday, we didn't know on the Monday what team they were going to be in on the Saturday. They ended up playing in the seconds on the Saturday and therefore couldn't then play on the Sunday because they'd gone over the two matches, which was of qualification, which was fine, which is absolutely right. But we loved it. Absolutely. And we thought, we should embrace it, which we did. And next year we hope to put our fourth team in to the Telegraph Cup or whatever one they will be pitched in. But again, it'll be difficult for them with the qualification. Maybe that wants looking at for third and fourth teams, perhaps. I don't know. But loved it. Can't wait for next year.
Brilliant. Thank you. Stuart, you've got a hand up.
Yeah, so I play at Coombe. Well, not as much this season as I like to, but there's a club where we have always embraced the cups. I think we've made, obviously in the ACA time, made 3 finals in the last 6-7 years. And then again this year, we actually won the Telegraph Cup. Just for us, it's an opportunity. We don't play Sunday cricket. I know people have teams and you all fill up your fixture list. We don't. So for us, there's a chance to have a game on a Sunday occasionally. Like everyone else, we struggle. People playing two at weekends. Everyone's got family commitments, etc. But it's one of those ones where you play your first round and you kind of maybe muddle through, and then you get to still you're in the quarterfinal because the way the competition works, only 4 games to the final. And it soon picks up momentum. I'm just saying. So I personally would encourage all teams if they can to just have a look at it and embrace it if they can, because it's one of those ones where when we look back at the last 7-8 years, as you do in the pub and having a chat about games, normally the cup games come up quite regularly because they are kind of, don't they have a different edge to them as opposed to the same 18 league game season the cups do. Yeah, generally have a real nice feel to them.
Thanks very much. Patrick, welcome along.
Hi Ian, you're right.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Just from a Bletchley point of view, we play Sunday cricket anyway in the Beds League, and the travel for us probably wouldn't have been suited on a Sunday as well as a Saturday. So I don't think we would put one forward in next year either. It looks a great competition. I just think for where we are geographically, it wouldn't work for us as a club.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Thoughts on a Tier 1 and 2 Cup or Cup for Tier
Just
1
to
and
put
2?
some a background, the reason this year the Area Cup was Tier 3 and Tier 4s together was we felt it was completely appropriate that the Area Cup, having been an OCA Cup, OCA teams had an opportunity to win it. And obviously, if we'd have had it, if we'd said the Area Cup is the top cup, that's for Tiers 1 and 2, you would have been this year excluded. That won't be true in future years as some of you get promoted. So we would, you know, we're looking at inventing potentially a cup for those Division 1 and 2 teams, which has a slightly different context.
Yeah, and I think the point Pete makes also that the National Village Cup sometimes takes out some of the Tier 1 and 2 teams, although not everyone qualifies as a village. So, you know, some people are excluded from that.
But as Coombe said, you know, realistically, without getting a huge amount more entrants next year, it is 4 games from the first game to the final.
Yeah.
So it's not a massive disruptive force through the season, and all the dates of those games were all published. And we had a huge amount, particularly because of the weather in May, there was a huge amount of flexibility on what Sunday those games were actually played on, for lots of reasons, mostly the weather, but other reasons were taken into account. So it's, you don't have to rip up your fixture list in case you get a cup run, I think would be the view there.
Okay. Any more on cups? No. Okay. Right. Here's one that's always sparks a bit. Balls. So our situation coming into the league was that in previous years, the OCA had used the Hampton ball. The CCL had, up until about 5 years ago, used the Blenheim, and then we had moved on to the Buckingham. And so the rules that we set in this year for balls, and there were 1 or 2 exceptions by necessity rather than intention, I think, was that tiers 1 to 5 would always play with the Buckingham. Tiers 6 and below could use the Hampton, providing they used the same type of ball in both innings. So you could use Buckingham or Hampton in the lower tiers. Now, both balls are made by Tiflex. As a combined league, our ball order for this season came to around £55,000. So we are a customer not to be ignored now by Tiflex. And as it happens, we are now at the end of our 3-year contract with them. So they're very keen to get into negotiation with us. They want to talk. They obviously want to keep the business. As soon as the 2 leagues came together, a whole bunch of other ball suppliers have been inundating me with free supplies of balls that they want us to try out. Just want to get your feedback on what you felt about each or both or either ball. Daniel, let's start with you.
Obviously, as predominantly a batsman, I'm very happy with that ball. Speaking from our bowler's point of view, the Buckingham is a bit lacking in seam.
Seam?
Yeah, it's a pretty flat ball, and the shine comes off it like very rapid. I mean, I'm not a big fan. I mean, obviously as a batter, I quite enjoy it, but I think looking at it as a ball, I'm not very impressed. Not that the Hampton's any better, particularly. I think neither is great, and we should definitely look at these other people flirting with us.
Oh, I will flirt with them mercilessly. Any other feedback on that? I would just say, while everyone's thinking about it, there is a distinct difference between the 2 balls in that the Hampton is a lacquered ball and the Buckingham is a waxed ball. Now, what you tend to find with a waxed ball is that initial shine coming out of the box comes off quite quickly because the wax goes through a little quicker. But if you work the Buckingham, you can get a ball that's 50 overs old and absolutely gleaming on the other side. Now, the unfortunate thing for the last 2 years is we've not been, and I'm speaking here as a bowler who swings the ball, but for the last 2 years, we haven't really been allowed to work on the balls properly. And I think in that sense, the Buckingham may not have perhaps shone out as it perhaps had in previous seasons. But no, yeah, points accepted. I mean, I think what it always comes down to at the AGM when we discuss this is, are you happy with what we got for what you paid? If you're not happy with it, are you prepared to pay a bit more for it? Because there is a certain amount of negotiation that we can exercise, and maybe a bit more now that we've got a bigger order to play with. But in the end, if you go, this is how much money we have, you get a ball that costs that, which in the Charitable League we found slightly to our cost 6 or 7 years ago when we negotiated a reduction in the price of the ball, and as a result got a ball that was called the same but wasn't the same. Any other feedback from anyone who was using a different ball or the same ball?
Yeah, can I just say something?
Yeah, sure, Mike.
Neither ball we felt were any good. Would it not be true with the advanced purchase power that we could talk to Reader or Dukes, and would they be significantly more expensive?
I wouldn't say definitively. Our gut feel is for the ball that we did trial the Duke a couple of seasons ago, the one that they were using in the Thames Valley.
Right.
And the feedback from the teams who used it was, don't ever bring that back here. Give us back the one we had before, please.
Okay.
But you know, that's 3 or 4 years ago. That may have changed. I mean, we can certainly talk to them. My gut feel is that both of those two would be a little more expensive.
Can Tom tell us how much the Oxford Downs are paying for the Reader?
No.
I thought that might be the answer.
Is it a secret?
No, I've no idea. I didn't even know we were doing that.
I think if I remember from the discussions earlier that we're talking about between £20 and £24 for that next ball up, but I might be wrong because of the economies of scale, of course.
But would our purchase be even more significant than the home counties now?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, by miles.
They've got 2 divisions. We've got 18.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. David Beck.
Yeah, the non-negotiable. Well, no, the standard price of the Duke's balls is around £18 because we've looked into it. Now that's just purely for a small order, not the £50,000 we've got. And that price is about the same for all 3 balls that they manufacture, which is suitable. You know, you can get Dukes up to 30, 40 quid. But the Ambassador, the Club Match and the Viceroy are all around about £18, sort of as a single club purchase. The Reader's Extra Special, which we looked at as well, is again £18, but no idea on quality.
The next ball up in the Tiflex catalogue is the Windsor, and I think we would probably be paying about 20 to 21 for that, and that would be a bulk order.
I think the home counties pay about 22, 23. I might be wrong, but I think they do. Neil might know.
I'll just catch him, Dave. I've got absolutely no idea. I'll try to anyway. I'm just trying to find some bowlers that can actually use a ball. They're not worried about the actual ball. We've never had any complaint about the ball at all. It's been, I've never heard any grumbles at our club about it. So you're speaking to the wrong guy here, I'm afraid.
Okay. Anything else on balls? All I would say going forward, whatever we decide to use, if you do have an issue with a ball, whatever that issue is, if the quarter seam splits, if I couldn't get it to swing, that's a tough one to sell to the manufacturer. But if we get faults in the ball or they're going out of shape, don't wait till the end of season forums. Get in touch with the committee straight away and say, you might want to take this one back to Flex or Reader or Duke or whoever we're dealing with at the time, and say to them, that's not acceptable for a ball that's 35 overs old. One of the problems we do have is that we tend to end up with a series of comments that we take back to Tiflex and say, oh, well, you know, somebody said it was really rough in the wet. They said, oh, show us. No, we haven't got it, sorry. They go, wow, yeah, you would say that, wouldn't you? So if you do have any bad experience with balls, whatever they are, let us know, and we can log it, catalog it, get onto them straight away, and say this is not a thing we want to see repeated. Right. This one, I think.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, sure, mate.
The balls have been subsidised by the Child League in, I think, the last couple of seasons. Is it the intention of the Child League to continue that for this year, next year?
We didn't subsidise them. We just didn't take any profit on them. Well, I think we took some pennies.
Okay.
So we sold whatever we paid for them, we rounded up to the nearest pound, and that's what we charged the clubs for them.
Would that be the case next year?
I couldn't say that definitively at the moment, but you know, the league's in reasonably robust financial health. We're not looking to milk you for any more money than we need to. And that, you know, the balls is an opportunity. In years gone by, the profit on the balls was what ran the league.
Yeah.
I would suspect, well, I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I would suspect that we wouldn't need to be making a significant profit on balls next year. So I would think you'll be paying pretty much what we pay for them, to a conveniently round number.
So bearing in mind what's been said by David about the Reader and the Dukes, is it something you're going to consider for next season?
It's unlikely that we would make a change for next season, but if we were going to go down a line, then we would possibly look to go with a one-year contract for Tiflex and do an extensive trial. What I'd hate to do is change the ball and by week 4 have 40 complaints that it's not good enough. Whatever we use, we want to make sure we've tried it before we put it into general use in the league.
Okay.
I was just going to add to that, you know, we were going to trial balls this year, but with the new season and new clubs and everything, we didn't want to throw that into the mix as well. We wanted the season to settle out and then try balls next year, as you know, to give people a proper go at them before inputting them into the league.
Yeah, it's the disadvantage of not being a speedboat anymore and being a big ocean liner. It takes us a little longer to change direction. Okay.
Nigel at Sunderwell?
Yeah, hi Nigel. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick idea about the balls. If you wanted to experiment with a ball, perhaps choosing cup competitions as an idea to experiment with a ball.
We did use, I believe, the Lord's cricket ball in some of the cup finals this year.
Yes, we used the Lord's cricket ball for the Telegraph Cup and the Airy Cup final, and they were reasonably well received. But it's just a matter of coming up with an appropriate level, and something we will be discussing committee. As Pete says, there was pressure last year for us to have a trial of balls. We felt with the uncertainties with COVID and also with the new league, this year was not the right time to do that. It may well be that we are considering a trial next year, but that will come from our cricket committee in our committee meetings.
Sure. If you suggest to a brand that perhaps a bigger order was coming, if they supplied maybe 100 balls for cup competitions,
that would last us for 3 or 4 years. Yes.
Yeah.
I guess the other point, and I don't know all about all the cups, but would you get a true test anyway, because they're limited in their overs, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you need to be careful if we're looking at a ball for Division 1, which is 100 overs. The cups are all 80 overs, so we just need to make sure that they do last the course. What we did probably 4 years ago now is we chose a weekend, and in a particular division, we did different trials of balls on particular grounds, potentially used them home and away, and got feedback. And as Ian said, some of the feedback that we got from those alternatives, which you have to think the manufacturer probably picked out as better examples of their particular wares, didn't actually result in anybody saying, "Oh no, we should use this, not the other one." And if we say to readers, "Can we have a box of balls to trial?" they will pick out a very good box for us, because that's what people are bound to do. The problem comes when they go off to manufacturing, and they're obviously all made in streets in India and Pakistan, and they're all made side by side, and they're made, as Ian said earlier, to a price. So whatever price is negotiated, that sounds great, but that isn't necessarily the same ball as you used last year for the same price. And there's no way of controlling that. We don't obviously have any impact over quality control.
Yeah, the balls we used in the cup final from Lords, I mean, they email me about once every 4 weeks and say, please, can I send you another 40 balls free of charge? And it got to the point I was just running out of places to put them, so I eventually had to say no. But you know, we have a decent stock of Lords balls at the moment to be able to trial those next year, and I think any manufacturer that we contact will be happy to supply 36, 42 balls for us to try out maybe for 2 or 3 weeks. I think, as Gary said, those last 10 overs between 40 and 50 are probably where the ball takes the most punishment. So we're going to I think the trial needs to be in league matches. Certainly the cups give us an indication. You know, if it works well in the cup game, okay, let's move it on and trial it in the league game. If it works well there, then very possibly it's something that we'd look at. But you know, we want to try and balance off what you've got to pay against a good quality ball. And you know, for some of the clubs, particularly in the lower levels, we add £5 per ball. That's a chunk of money that you know, they could have probably been spending somewhere else. If we're all good on balls, we're going to move on to another favourite, tees. Now, let me just lay out where we are on tees. There is no rule in the Charwell League on tees. Tees in the league are a convention, not a rule or a requirement. But it's been a well-observed convention for many, many years that you will supply a tee for the team that visits you, and when you visit them, they will supply the tee. And if it so happens that one of those games gets rained off, well, there you go. That can happen. But in general terms, each team makes 9 tees a year and receives 9 tees a year. And then 2 years ago, someone sneezed in the market in China, and we all stopped having tea. Now we've had 2 seasons of Bring Your Own, and a variety of opinions that have come in. Next season, we would expect that we will be free to resume as we wish to resume. So we'll put it any more specifically than that. What are your thoughts? Would you like to see tees back, or would you like to continue as we are, as we have been for the last 2 years?
Can I come in here?
Yeah, please do, Mike.
We've discussed this, and we would prefer as a club, because as you say, the first 3 or 4 games of the season were cancelled. That would have been an expense to the club. Lots of occasions we actually find ourselves throwing some items of tea away. From my feedback I've had from various clubs this year, they've enjoyed the fact that people bring along the food they wish to eat. So some clubs have got caterers in to do it. Some people obviously are lucky to have their own tea ladies, but from our point of view, we would prefer not to have teas at all, and for players to bring their own teas.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone concur or disagree?
Exact opposite from us. In we would love tees to return. Well, I would certainly, and we would as a club. We're in a different position to Robert. We've got caterers certainly for our first team ground, and it's tea ladies and players that do them at the second, like most clubs. And we would love them to return. And if they do, great. If they don't, we roll with what we've done in the last, couple of years, year and a half.
Jimmy, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm torn because as a captain, it's one less thing to worry about organising. And but as a player, I do love having them. And most of my players, I have to say, they all love having a cricket tee. So I think if I turn around and said, yeah, tees are back next year, lads, they would be over the moon. So, yeah, I think we would be for having tees again as well. So
I'll tell you what we did at our club. We pulled the second team, and because the first team had a tea lady, so they're fine. But we pulled the second team and said, tees back or not? and I think it came out at 9-2 in favour of teas back. And I said, okay, I'm going to give you another chance to vote on the understanding that if you vote yes for teas, you are volunteering to do a tea next year. 7-4 against.
It's a good test.
And yeah.
Sorry,
I agree from a captain's point of view. Again, I think, players would love it. It's great, but a lot of players will just turn up and probably just play, which is very nice. But I think from a captain's point of view, it's a lot of hard work, and especially you've got to provide a scorer. For a captain's all week, you're picking the team. You kind of you need to obviously sort of umpires out and things like that. So it's quite a lot to do, I guess. But I guess it's a nice thing to have, but maybe a compromise. So if people want to bring things which people can share or bring nice things for other people, that's fine. But I think general consensus at team is that it's quite nice without it.
One of the things that came up last week on a forum is one club, even this year, started doing a tea for their own club. Now, there's nothing, obviously, if you're supposed to bring your own tea, there's nothing to stop 11 players, as you've alluded to, agreeing that there's going to be a communal tea. Now, obviously, there's potential for offence to be caused because the home team got a tea the away team haven't, although the away team would presumably turn up with their own food. But there is nothing to say that the 11 home players, or the 11 away players, if they're a bit more organised, cannot provide a communal tea, that team, without it falling upon you to have to organise a tea for the opposition, or if you don't, or tea at all if you don't want to, if that was the result of any decision.
Bob, you've got your electronic hand up. Welcome.
Yes, so from our perspective, we'd rather not have teas, but can I ask, how will it be decided? Is it going to be a vote, or are the committee going to decide?
Well, we'll kind of sum up. I've already got a summary document in place to discuss tomorrow night. We have already suggested that this might be a poll on the website. Now, one of the concerns that came up last night was we know a lot of people would like them back. We know a lot of people don't want them. What we would really, really not want is for you to say, well, I'll tell you what, sort it out for yourselves, because that's just going to become confusing. So I think where we'll probably end up is polling all the clubs. Based on that poll, we'll then come back and say the convention of teas is back, or the convention of teas is dismissed. You should not on any occasion expect to get a tea when you go away, or you should always expect to get a tea when you go away, so that it's consistent throughout. What we don't want is clubs to be ringing each other up on Tuesday and going, well, we do teas. Do you want tea? Oh, well, we don't do tea. Okay, well, we'll do teas for you, but it's 45 quid, and it's just going to get messy. So ultimately, it'll be decided by the clubs as to how they want to go forward, not by us. We'll ask people to consider it carefully, and then we'll look to put back in place one piece of guidance on how it should be done or shouldn't be done.
And is there any possibility that it might apply to some divisions and not others?
I would say not. I think sometimes we get quite insular when we think about a specific division, but actually clubs have teams in multiple divisions, and the captains are probably the only ones who play in those teams every week. So people start to get confused and start bringing their own food and so on. I would suggest not, unless that becomes something that becomes a surge of opinion. I think it'll be across the league one way or the other. Daniel.
Yeah, one of the rare instances where I've changed my mind about something. I would say that I'm instinctively anti-tea, thinking it's just another thing to deal with.
Yeah.
And then we came across the good ladies of Chadlington, who after August the 19th put on a sumptuous tea for us. And it made me realise that there are occasions when it's more than just food. And breaking of bread can deal with spikiness on the pitch and bringing teams together when perhaps the game is not doing that. We shouldn't underestimate the importance of that.
Yeah, and I concur with that. I hadn't really missed them. We went over to the rep games at Finch Hampstead in August, and there was a fantastic tea later on, and it was it was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. I thought, yeah, no, I've really missed this. Whether you need it every week or whether you need it on a Sunday, perhaps, and that maybe that encourages people to play in the cups or something. I don't know, but yeah, I'd concur. It's difficult to remember how much you missed them until you have a really good tea and you think, yeah, actually, this is a good way to play cricket.
Perspective, we are very much against having teas again. It's always been a massive bugbear for us to get the tea sorted each week.
I'm not disputing that bit.
If it's one less thing to sort out, then we're happy. I do take the point that Daniel made, but for us, like, we'll always stay for a drink wherever we go, and that's when we sit and we have a chat with the opposition, and it's a real nice part of the game for us. But tea, generally, we found over the years, we'll get our tea and sit around one table, and the other team will sit around their table. There's not too much breaking of bread really anyway, so it's just kind of one extra thing to trying to arrange, as well as the pitch, as well as the umpires, as well as scorers, etc., etc. So yeah, we'd rather not continue with teas.
Else want to chip in on this one?
I think from Oxford Downs, it's everyone's already said what the feedback from us is. The players are really keen, but then the people that have to do all the organising probably less so. From our, and this isn't, again, I don't think this would work, but for us, organising it for ones and twos, where we've got a kitchen in a good clubhouse, is very different to organising it for the threes and fours, where we're at Copethorpe and we've got a wooden hut and no running water and all of that. And I expect it wouldn't work, but the idea that it's only, rather than for certain divisions, it's for the ones and the twos, not for the threes and the fours. But I imagine that's probably wouldn't work and would probably get confusing. But it just popped into my head as people were talking. But basically, just agreeing with what others have already said on it.
Is there a way you can make it optional just for the home team? So the home team decides, okay, and it's communicated in advance, like other things, like umpire names and stuff like that. You can go in the league, look at the fixture, little cake next to the fixture or something like that, and says, this fixture, this home, the tea is going to be provided by, the home club. Nobody takes offence if people know in advance that they know not to bring their own food. So maybe that's an option. I don't know.
I think that gets, as Ian said, I think that gets complicated because if you don't reciprocate, do you pay them for tea? And you start negotiating how much you pay. And if you decide that on the day, actually, no, we don't want tea, have you prepared twice as much? I think it just becomes very, very complicated.
Okay, well, gentlemen, can I say you've been absolutely no help whatsoever? Which is a fair reflection, I think, of a fairly divided opinion across all of the meetings. That
Yeah, and I think one of the massive problems with no teas is people aren't lining their stomach. 3 or 4 beers in afterwards, people are struggling. Where you were just warming up after 3 with eating the leftover teas as well after the game, and we're not selling as much beer. I think people are frankly pissed a bit earlier than they used to be. I don't know.
Well, Neil, I'd have to say we found regionalisation has compensated for that because you don't have to go home so early, so people stay for more beer. So,
yeah. Well,
but
I'm not saying for a second that any of us go home, but well, indeed. I'm accused of a lot of things, but going home early isn't one of them. I would like to think.
Point. I've got a couple of little sort of left fielders that people raised in advance of the forums, and just out of due diligence, I'm going to put these in. One team clubs. Now, obviously, with the OCA clubs coming in, we had quite a surge of one team clubs coming in. We set a tier 5 limit on one team clubs. So, and the reason for that is purely nothing other than we do not want ever to see a tier 4 game forfeited because of lack of players. And there were, I think, 3 forfeits in tier 5 this year, which kind of, yes, there were circumstances and so on, but it just kind of reinforced our thoughts that it's not something we want happening in the higher leagues. Sorry?
Isn't that more a COVID thing?
No, we did distinguish between COVID what we call the COVID pass. If a club came to us and said we've got 5 players isolated, we didn't count that as a forfeit. We counted that as a cancelled match. But in each of the 3 cases in Tier 5, the club rang us and said, we've got a wedding or we've got the... I mean, just say COVID and you get away with it. But they all came clean and said, no, it's our fault, we can't raise a side. And that was the one thing we didn't want to see happening in Tier 4. So that kind of, to some extent, reinforced our thoughts on that. That said, I want to open that to the debate. But also, we've had a suggestion, and thus far it's been supported by just the club that proposed it, that Tier 8 should not have any one-team clubs in it because that's unfair on the 2s, 3s, and 4s that are down there. They should only be allowed to come in Tier 7. I'm going to shut up now because I don't... Any thoughts? Patrick?
Terrible idea. I don't particularly get it.
Thank you very much.
I wouldn't support that.
Patrick.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can dismiss that one out of hand. The Tier 5 limit, does that seem reasonable?
Well, obviously for us, Coombe, we're 1-tier club, we're in Tier 5, so I guess I'm not sure anyone else in the cause affected, but I'm guessing we're one who are.
Yeah.
I understand the thought process to the league, if I'm honest. We struggle, we probably play with 10, 2 or 3 times this season at least. So I get the thought process. Frustrating, I guess, if we have a good season like we won the cup, I guess, for example, you have to question if we were playing a cup final, cup semi-final, and a league game on a Saturday, which would you prioritise? Because we can't go up. So it gives us that kind of dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
If we were on the top end of the tier, that is obviously we started well last year and fell away. It's not something we've ever discussed. Obviously, we play the same team, we play the same players most games anyway. But it's, I guess I know the whole point is to be aspirational, to get the second team going again. So if you do get promoted, then you can obviously have a second team. But finding 11 players, another 11 players, but where you realistically probably need another 15, because the Wolseley people are away on holidays, etc., isn't so easy. So I'm not against the league's decision on it. It's just one for us. It's a tough one because obviously I have aspirations to do have some players in our squad, and you kind of fear, okay, if we end up winning the league next year and we can't go up, are those players going to stay? Why would they? That's obviously the challenge we face. So, but it's not one I have an answer to either. Because obviously the obvious answer is to get a second team. So,
just Daniel.
Couldn't you just to Stuart, if it became an issue, could you not just merge with a neighbouring club?
Well, we could do, but we've got 140 years history. So, give it all away to merge with Stonesfield. Of course, it's an option. We've discussed it before, but they've got 2 clubs, and one would be a strong unit, I'd imagine. But also, we've been playing cricket on the green for 140 years, and you give it away. So,
Tim.
Yeah, I think it's a bit not unfair, but it kind of stifles kind of teams' aspirations to go higher, and maybe it should be looked at from a club's record of game completions and non-forfeit. So you get a team this year who didn't forfeit a single game. That would say that they probably got a pretty strong team, first team, and maybe we should look at it from an individual team record as opposed to a blanket rule on it. Maybe.
I think if it became an issue, the committee would certainly be open to a discussion with the club. We put it that way. I mean, the rule was put in place initially because we didn't know the clubs, and actually, as the ranking came through, there was no one-team club that was particularly close to being placed in Tier 4, and so that line kind of drew itself, and then sort of looked back on itself and became a rule. But yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think if somebody romps away with the league with one team and has a record of not having ever forfeited, and I think probably we'd want a record of having played with 11 men every week, then I think that's something we would certainly be prepared to talk about.
Yeah, I would just like to add that I definitely feel it would be unfair on some of the stronger one-team clubs to limit them to go no further than Division 5. I think that and if they were successful, that might encourage more players to that club. So to form a second team, perhaps.
Okay, yeah, fair point. Okay. Right. Strap yourself. Oh, sorry, Tim. Is that a legacy hand or is that a new one?
No, sorry, new one. Sorry.
Okay.
And I just understanding from obviously where OCA came from last year as well. I think did they just not play every week as well? So it gave them opportunities for people to have like a couple of weeks off within the season. So I don't know. Maybe we need to kind of look at making it easy. Well, maybe not have so much strict rules on registrations or something like that. Have approach it like that to encourage those one teams to continue to kind of put teams out. Maybe a little bit more flexibility, but I think maybe we just need to look at where the OCA, how that was structured, I guess, when they were playing in there to allow teams to have a little bit more flexibility, a bit more options to kind of get players out every week. Maybe we look to promote, to try and get the teams out as opposed to restrict teams going up if they can't get teams out. Just an idea.
Yeah, fair enough. It's all being recorded. Okay. Right, I'm going to move on now to slightly meatier side. I'm just going to say this. I'm going to put my tin hat on and I'm going to retire. Leg side wides.
No.
Yeah, I would like to say something about this. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, on you go, Mike.
Watching a lot of Tier 5 games and also umpiring in a number of games in Tier 5 this year. I had 4 or 5 experiences of an extra 12 overs being played in the game because of leg side wides, because of a different interpretation of everything down leg side in the win-lose games, even if it's an inch or 2 inches down the leg side, was deemed to be a wide. Now, if you could bowl and be an ex-bowler at the stumps or outside the off stump consistently for 10 overs, you probably wouldn't be playing in Tier 5. I also found it embarrassing for young lads who were playing in that division to have 3 or 4 wide balls in an over. I think it was discouraging and demoralising for them. So certainly I think the league need to look at this because it's adding extra time to an already long game. And I just think it can be not advantageous to the younger element, and even some of the old guys or older guys struggle to do that.
Okay, thank you. I'm a Tier 7 bowler. I'm saying nothing. Yeah. But any other thoughts? But Patrick.
Yeah, I think in the top divisions of the Cherwell League, I think leg side wides should be a thing. I think in the bottom divisions, it shouldn't be. We had one game this year for our second team in 7A where everything given down leg was a wide, and the game went on for forever. And we did sort of speak to the umpire in question, and he said it's win-lose cricket, and this is what we play.
That was it.
Yeah,
that's a misinterpretation by the umpire of the rules.
Yeah, I mean that is incorrect. I mean the rules state tiers 1 to 5, anything down leg in win-lose is a wide. Below that, it's profile wides, and in win-lose draw, it's profile wides throughout.
Yeah,
and there was certainly some misunderstanding in both directions. on that.
Patrick,
On that, oh, sorry.
Patrick, you said top divisions and bottom divisions. Where would you draw the line between the top and the bottom?
I think the line's always been set at 4, hasn't it, in recent years? Would that be?
No,
6, I think,
6
probably from
in the Travel
recollection.
League, yeah.
But obviously, if you've got 2 Division 4s and what might be 2 Division 3s, then what was the equivalent? 6 divisions down from the top is a higher number than 6 this time around.
Yeah, I think our first team are in 4A, and I think I've got no problems with leg side wides in 4A. I think if you're playing that sort of standard, you should be able to bowl straight.
And in my experience, 5 should not everything down leg side. It should start at 5, I think, really, not at 4. That's my experience of umpiring this year.
Well, I think it's a good time to be discussing it because, as Gary said, with 2 Division 3s coming in, then we will have 60 sides in the top 4 tiers, and Tier 4 will be 2 divisions, Tier 5 will be 3 divisions. When you talk about natural lines being drawn, there does seem to be the beginnings of a natural line there. So that may be something to consider. Let me just throw this at those that are playing in the top 4 tiers. How would you feel about all leg side wides in all games? Win, lose, and win, lose, draw.
Oh. Well, Ian, speaking as a wicket keeper who kept wicket to a 19 ball over this year, and I don't know what the stats are. I trawled down the league stats last week when I was on holiday and looking at all the different things for everything, and there wasn't a column on the team that had bowled the most wides. Well, I know that Banbury Third's are top of that. There's absolutely no question. So
there will be
if there are no wides at all, it would please me greatly. I think we found the inconsistent. Dave Warner and I played in a game actually at the back end of the season when we went from draw cricket to the win-lose at the end of the season. Several of the umpires were still being very favourable to leg side wides rather than calling them. They were still in draw umpire mode, if that makes any sense. The umpires weren't bad. The umpiring was really good this year in our division, but they certainly didn't call enough at the end. It was our experience. Certainly the game Dave and I played in, it was it was interesting, but it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because where do you pitch it? And Robbo was saying earlier, I think div 6 and downwards maybe there could be a case, but 5 and upwards certainly people should be able to bowl straight in that grade, in my opinion.
Anyone want to hazard a guess how many wides were bowled last season? It was obviously spent holiday checking it out, but quite
30,000.
It's very close. It was just over 29,000. So just for that context, that's another 4,800 overs.
Yeah, but it was only 4,000 if you take Banbury out.
True.
Well, it was. Well, honestly, it was. I'm still shaking now at the thought of some of it. Deary me, it was dreadful. Absolutely. Anyway, stop it. Stop. Go. Move on.
David Beck.
Yeah, can I throw in a suggestion of an idea that was put to another forum? It's a question of profile wides. What do you believe is a profile wide? So to help with a profile wide, how about just using the guidelines, the blue guidelines? Anything outside of those, either leg or off, in the main, unless the batsman can reach it, which particularly applies to the offside, anything outside that is a wide. Because you can talk about profile wides all night, but again, you've got it's down to the umpire's interpretation of what a profile wide is. And we can all say, well, if it passes past the batsman when he stances just vary so much.
My own thoughts on that are the blue line on the leg side is far too far to the leg side to be a guide for. You're going to have some long levers to hit a ball that's just passing inside the blue line on the leg side. I mean, I did have one of my bowlers come up and say, that is good. There's plenty of room on the leg side on that blue line, isn't there? I did have to say to him, it's for left-handers, you muppet. I mean, perhaps a blue line and a red line.
I just
Yeah,
my view is
you probably need it halfway. You need another. If you wanted to be really accurate with it, and you wanted to add another line within that blue line, I think that might work quite well.
Can I just make a point here? You can draw lines, but umpires, if they're trained, spend hours on being taught what constitutes a wide and what doesn't. So don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting all umpires are perfect, because obviously we aren't. But I don't think the calling of wides is anywhere near as inconsistent as some players would have us believe. You know, I've been pulled up once or twice this season about that should have been a wide, and I've got my reasons for not giving it. So I think it's a training issue. I think we need umpires to be trained, and then players to have a little bit better understanding of what they're bearing in mind, like the bringing the ball into within reach. You know, a lot of players don't realise that if a batsman moves across and brings it in reach, then that's not a wide. And profile wides is very clear. We covered I've got a presentation on profile wides, which I used to try and get consistency between the umpires. And don't forget, there's an awful lot of umpires new to the Chilwell League this year, because a lot of umpires have come in from the OCA. So I think the problem is exaggerated. I'm not saying there isn't a problem at all, but I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as some people make out. I think, Nielsen, to be fair, 4,000 however many wides the figure was there suggests there is a problem.
30,
So it was
30,
it, sorry,
30,000.
30,000 suggests there is a problem. 4,000 overs, wasn't it? That's right.
Well, it's not. I mean, there's probably some 5 wides in there as well.
Well, yeah,
but, you know, well,
even if you halve it, it's 2,000 extra overs.
Oh, I think I'm agreeing with you, David. I don't think there should be, if you like, automatic anything down the leg side. I don't think is the answer. You know, the number of times I've had to give a wide because a batsman has leapt across to the off and the ball's missed leg stump by 2 inches. It's not a wide, really. We have to give it in the win-lose because those are the rules that are stated. But the batsman's got a bloody bat in his hand. Why didn't he hit it?
Yeah, I agree with that, Nielsen. I was more on the profile wides.
Yeah.
Whereas profile is an interpretation. And anything we can do to take away the interpretation into sort of fact would help the umpires.
Out of interest, Gary, do you know how many of the wides were leg-sided wides in the win-lose games? I'd imagine a whole percentage of that would be hugely more than in the win-lose draw games. Yeah. Actually, umpired Nielsen said 10 games this year at least. Yeah. I only gave 10, 15 leg-sided wides in all the games combined, you know, in the win-lose draw section.
Yeah.
Win-lose section, when you were doing leg-side, I'd imagine it's a much higher percentage.
Oh, absolutely, and that's the reason we allow 3 hours and 10 minutes for 50 overs in win-lose, and 3 hours 10 minutes for 53 overs in win-lose draw, because there are more wides.
I just wonder whether everyone on the forum thought that it is a massive issue with leg-sided wides with the batsman's stance, profile. Sorry, should I say? Just be doing a massive issue, because I haven't really had any complaints from. Not talking to captains on the day about, you get the odd look occasionally, when you are umpiring, but I didn't see a big issue with the profiling of leg-sided wides, if that makes sense. Games, I'm not sure people playing more foul, there was lots of umpires getting it wrong, I don't know.
Sunningwell have had their hand up for about 20 minutes now.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, from my experiences down in the Tier 7, it didn't really matter what the guidance was the umpires seemed to make their own decisions on wides, regardless if it was leg side or outside off stump. It made no difference. I didn't really care, to be honest, as long as it was the same in both innings. Pretty much every week was a slightly different interpretation of a wide. And again, I didn't really mind about that as long as it was the same in both innings. And which it was generally quite consistent through the game. However, each game would be a different interpretation every week, regardless if it was win-lose or win-lose-draw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jim Howe.
I was always under the impression that the umpires are the sole arbitrators of the laws of cricket, and within our rules, if the rules are there, if you bowl two consecutive balls that are called as leg side wides, there's only one way of remedying that, and that is to bowl straighter. So I think the rules are absolutely fine. It is all about umpires being trained as to what should and what shouldn't be given a wide under the rules that are existing, and we just get on with it.
I tend to agree with that to some extent, and I'm going to speak here not as Secretary of the League, but as a Tier 7 bowler. I don't accept the argument that it's all right if it's the same for both sides, because we played in many games where I might have slid one or two down and they weren't called, where the opposition slid 10, 12 down and they weren't called. Now, the team that was bowling straighter there is disadvantaged because we're basically dumbing down the rules. We're moving down to the lowest common denominator. And I don't think that's the way forward. I think we need to encourage kids, and sometimes it's tough love, but we need to encourage kids to learn to bowl straight. And quite frankly, the place to learn to bowl straight is not in the middle, it's in the nets. That's where you learn to bowl straight. And learning to overcome your nerves comes in the matches. But I didn't feel any better for sliding one down in a 9-over spell and not being wided for it when the first change bowler in the opposition slid 12 or 15 down and didn't get wided for it, because that just cost us 15 runs. Okay, I'm taking my bowler's hat off now and going back to league here.
You can of course get the situation where one umpire is very strict on leg side wides and the other umpire is using the profile wide situation. So that's where it can get a little bit tricky. I always have a conversation with my fellow umpire when I go to umpire as to the leg side situation, certainly in Division 5. And I think we need to be a bit more lenient there than what you would in 1, 2, 3, and 4. So some guys have said to me, no, I'm going to give everything down the leg side a wide.
Which at the moment would be correct if you were playing win-lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 1 to 5.
Yeah.
Okay, have we exhausted that one? It kind of dovetails in a little bit to the next topic, which is umpiring. Now, this is not an invitation to relay all of the duff decisions you got this year. This is more about the process of producing umpires for the league. So the two leagues came at this from quite differing standpoints. So the OCA, we know, had always had independent, neutral umpires for every game. At least that was the goal. The CCL had an approach where they were keen to encourage club umpires to get people involved in the game. I think both probably have their merits, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. Daniel, your hand is straight up there.
Yeah. We actually polled our entire club about this, and it was the single biggest issue brought up from the merger. There is a big disparity between the club umpires and the panel umpires. It's been very controversial on several occasions. We've had many umpires, I would say the majority of umpires, who actually frankly don't know the laws of cricket when they're coming in from the club umpire side. And I mean that in the harshest possible way. It's really bad.
I completely refute that from all the experience I've had over the last few years. So I'm talking my Stag and Church hat on there. Absolutely disagree. We've had just as good club umpires as we've had panel umpires for many years. The fact that somebody doesn't want to travel some distance and wants to remain with the club they might have been in for a number of years does not turn them into a cheat, if you want to use that word, or somebody who's incompetent.
I want to distinguish between an umpire who's umpiring and not a player brought on.
I was making that same distinction.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about players.
Right,
Yeah.
you're talking about umpires. Our issue mainly is when players are umpiring.
No, totally agree. Yeah.
Rather than when players are umpiring, rather than when you've got a truck. And we travel with our own umpire, and he's as as everyone else. It's the players I'm talking about, not the umpires. Sorry, allow me to qualify that. It's when we've encountered a player from the other team, it's been awful.
Okay, I think.
And how many times have you played in a game? It's just an interesting question. If you travel with an umpire, then presumably a player's only ever been at square leg.
Well, that's been one of the issues we've encountered.
Well, no, I mean the rules are very clear. If one umpire turns up, he does both things. There should be no debate there. You don't have to debate that with the opposition. That's the rule. So if you fall foul of that, then that's a shame.
Gary, on two occasions this year, I've had to have that conversation in the middle.
Well, yeah, okay, but you should have won that argument. If that's what it was.
It's not.
So we are talking about square leg umpires here, then.
No, I did, but the bottom line is that on two occasions this season, I just speaking personally, I've had to have that conversation in the middle, which means that the laws aren't known widely within the teams.
Okay, I think for this conversation, it's useful to define what I think there are three types of umpire. So there's a neutral umpire, there is a non-playing umpire, and there is a player who umpires the game. Now, I think just to dispel any notion to the contrary, the Chairwell League does not favour or encourage players from umpiring the game. If there are no umpires there, then that is the only option. But the rules are specifically written that if there is a non-playing umpire, that umpire will do both ends. And that may be a point that we need to get across more forcefully and ensure that all clubs are aware. If you travel with an umpire, club or neutral, of no distinction in that regard, that umpire has total control of the game. And any players who are standing should be standing at square leg throughout. Where we did get some debate was when a club would turn up with a neutral panel umpire and the other club provided a non-playing umpire. The team that had a neutral panel umpire said, he should only be standing at square leg. Well, our stance as a league is no, that's not necessarily the case. If the guy is given up his day not to play cricket and to umpire the game, he should be entitled to stand at an end.
I think this is something you don't solve on a game-by-game basis. If you've got an umpire who's routinely being complained about, then that's something the league takes up with the club.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just to reiterate, I didn't mean to suggest that a non-playing umpire was the problem. We travel with an umpire. I mean,
okay, well, that's good. But as Ian and I both said, you may have had to have that debate, but you shouldn't have done. And if we need to reinforce the rules that, if there's an umpire there, players stand at square leg and have as much influence at square leg as any person would at square leg, which hopefully is minimal. That shouldn't. Yes, that's not up for debate.
Yeah. Okay. Patrick.
Yeah, just a quick one. I thought the standard of umpiring was good this year. No complaints on any umpires. Even the club umpires that were travelling with clubs in 4A were spot on. No complaints about them. I couldn't argue that they were favouring the home side or anything like that. They were spot on. So hats off to Nielsen for organising that through the year. And yeah, fingers crossed it'll be the same again.
Anyone else?
Could I would like to echo that in 4B. I thought the umpiring was really good. We didn't have any incidents really. Well, there was nothing. It was excellent. Well, there was excellent. A lot of new umpires that we came across, former OCA umpires, and they were really good. And it was, yeah, good. 4B, excellent.
Okay, I think from all four forums, I think the one thing that is clear is that we need to more clearly define the umpires as we just had. So neutral, non-playing, and players jumping in because there's no other option, and make sure that those rules are clearly understood. Because I think there was a general acceptance that you might get a neutral umpire that you didn't think was very good, and you might get a club umpire who you thought was excellent, or you might get it the other way around. But there's no suggestion of anything particularly underhand in that. It was just umpires have good days and bad days. Yeah. Us as players, obviously, we never make any mistakes, so we expect that the umpires will do the same. So, okay.
Can I ask one question about this?
Yeah, sure.
A question for Nielsen, really. Were there many clubs in 1 to 5 that didn't have a panel umpire and subsequently got docked 5 points on each and every game? Were there many of those, Nielsen?
No, there was, and when you say panel umpire,
weren't they?
In tiers 4 and 5, it's acceptable to have a nominated club umpire.
Right.
Dinton were docked quite a lot of points.
They were, yeah.
Or Dinton seconds. This is their first team were okay.
Yeah.
And they were the only ones. There were. I can point to the odd one here and there. I think Sandford were -5 points, and maybe 1 or 2 others. But Dinton were the only serial offenders, and actually they.
In the end, they got one, didn't they?
Yeah, they found one via the Bucks ACO towards the end of the season. So fingers crossed he'll still be around next season.
Right. Okay.
It's not how we want the league to be settled. It's just that the rule is applied because unfortunately there are a few teams who, if there were no sanction, wouldn't try at all to find an umpire. They're adamant that it's not their problem or it shouldn't be their problem, and it's basically trying to educate clubs like that it's the clubs who have the contact with the potential people who can umpire. So if we want umpires, then the clubs have to play their part in doing that, and for the most part, most clubs do.
They do, yes. I just wondered if it was fair. That was all. If someone a club went out their way to try and find someone, and they couldn't find anyone, where it's fair that they should lose the 5 points.
Well, the problem is, Mike.
Yeah.
That's the only sanction that works.
Right. Okay.
If you just applied a fine or something, then rich clubs wouldn't bother. It would affect.
There's not many of those around.
Well, there are. I mean, everything's relative.
Oh,
isn't it?
yeah, I know. Well, yeah, Nixon's got one, but not us. But anyway, I'm just saying that you've answered the question. Thank you.
Nielsen, on that theme, just a slight tangent. Can I've been asked to ask this by basically everybody at our club. Clubs who provide umpires for the home counties Premier League, that doesn't count as one of your allocated umpires to the panel. Am I right in saying that?
That's correct, yeah.
Right, okay. Now, we had a situation this year where we've got, I'm sure you know, Martin Thomas is on the home counties panel, has been for many years, it's great. We had another umpire, Richard Lambden, halfway through the season, got called in to do home counties games.
Yeah.
As a result, we then had to find another umpire to cover Richard's games, where we believe, and you correct me if we're wrong here, that in the Thames Valley League, if you've got umpires on the home counties panel, that counts as your allocation to the league cricket, where it doesn't on the Chartwell League. Can that be looked at to be amended if possible? Is our question.
I'll take the question away. That is a surprise to me because I don't think it's the case. But I will. I'm not going to say you're wrong.
At the Thames Valley League.
Yeah.
No, I'm not 100% sure. That's just something that's been mentioned, and you might well be right. But whether that's right or whether that's wrong, we're in a position. I don't know how many other clubs have got umpires in the home counties set up. Well, we've got 2 now, and that, when you're finding it's a lot of umpires to find, and we think we're being penalised because we've got 2 guys that are good enough to be at that grade, and we're having to find guys down at the bottom. What do you think? Is that something that
it is something, Neil,
we looked
Neil,
at?
that it is something that we are aware of, and it's something we're concerned about. More so for teams like Sanford, for example, who are providing umpires to the panel, to the home counties panel, and then are being penalised because they have to do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh no, we're not the only club, I'm sure.
Our question has to be, if you're doing 2, which of our teams in the home counties aren't providing any? But that's something for us to discuss, not for.
I've got absolutely no idea.
Well, I don't want to discuss it here, but that's the other side of the coin, isn't it?
Yeah, well, part of the issue here, though, is that the home counties don't acknowledge that clubs are, that umpires are attached to clubs. As soon as you become a home counties umpire, you're by definition independent.
Yeah, that's right.
And as Brian says, that the problem for me is simply one of numbers. If I say to you, Richard Lambden's doing a home counties game, therefore your second team doesn't have to nominate an umpire, I've got a gap somewhere. It's as simple as that. And I don't have a solution for that.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Just one final point on umpires. What is the thought about the idea of a bonus point for providing an umpire in the lower divisions? So in tiers 5 and above, if you didn't, in tier 3 and above, if you didn't provide an umpire to the panel, and then in tiers 4 and 5, if you didn't provide a non-playing umpire, you were docked 5. In 6, 7, and 8, if you did provide an umpire, you got an extra point. Now, I haven't gone through all of the divisions, but I certainly looked at the division I was playing in, and whilst it made a difference, it didn't make any difference to the positions of the finishing teams. But in general, what do we think? Do we think that's a good idea, a fair idea?
Great idea. I'll nominate my 10 bowlers to be umpires in the lower leagues. Great.
Jimmy, your hand was up there.
Yeah, I thought it was a good idea. Maybe it could increase the points more. Maybe, I don't know, because our umpire did 6 games in a row, and he did both ends 6 weeks in a row, because we were the only club bringing an umpire, which is obviously is a lot. I think, I think that takes a lot of concentration, I think, to do that. But obviously, it's lower division cricket, and is it unfair as well? Because you're already trying to it's hard enough to find 11 players as well as another umpire. And so I don't have the answer to it, but I'm just saying it's obviously a problem. And if you have gaps higher up the league, it's all going to filter down, and the bottom league is going to be the end that has the least amount of umpires, isn't it? So
it does sound to me like you were particularly unlucky, because certainly towards the end of the season, the number of non-appointments, as far as the umpires were concerned, was in the region of 18 to 20, which means that out of 176 appointments, more than 150 are appointed every week. So I feel sorry for your umpire that you missed out on so many occasions.
Yeah, I think we were just very unlucky. I think, just seemed to fall on us every week. But there we go,
But I would say, and it was impossible to know what the actual figure was from 2 years before. Very realistic, because we didn't collect that information because we didn't know who the umpires were. It did encourage more people in clubs to take up umpiring, and that can only be a good thing. And if they progress to the panel, then that's even better. And that's probably the right place for them to start, is in those lower divisions. So I think anecdotally, we would say there were far more umpires in the bottom divisions than there have been in previous years. So therefore, Whether that's coincidence or whether the point was enough incentive, I'd like to think it was the point rather than coincidence.
Daniel, you've got a hand up. Is that a legacy or a? You've got an electronic hand up.
That is a legacy hand. I do.
It's a legacy hand. Okay, sorry about that. I'm just impressed I spotted it. But,
yeah. Sorry.
Okay. All done on umpires. Excellent. Right. Here we go. Now, I know one person who's keen to have a bit of a say on this next one. Looking at no one in particular. Win-lose versus win-lose-draw. The forum is yours. Okay, no one got anything to say? Okay, move on. Daniel.
Anymore.
Daniel?
So, yeah, we polled the whole club on this. And interestingly, it came out about 67-33. Against win-lose-draw. My main point, I mean, the arguments for it, one way or the other, are pretty clear. My main point is the way we currently structure it, you've got the outside, the wet bits of the season are the win-lose, and the ones that are most likely to have a game are win-lose-draw, which means we are maximizing the number of inconclusive games because you're getting the win-lose games are being rain affected, and the win-lose draws are going into this horrible death spiral of drawing games, which admittedly I can't stand. And I realize that some people quite like them, but try explaining it to any 14-year-old and keeping their interest in the cricket game. It's almost impossible, and it needs to die now. Cricket is only going in one direction, and win-lose draw is going to disappear. Might as well get on with it now rather than later. It's painful, and I watched 20 people out of 22 be miserable through several games this season. And the only people, there's one of them there, who managed to bat out a draw, feeling very pleased with themselves. But it's all destroying, and it kills the game of cricket.
I'll answer one of your points there. I'm not going to. I don't want to draw us into a debate on it, but I'll answer the point about the win-lose being at either end of the season. There are two reasons for that. The first reason is that's how the home counties do it, and we don't want to advantage or disadvantage clubs who are or are not in the home counties by requiring the home counties to have 5 bowlers and the Chairwell League not requiring to have 5 bowlers. So we match in that regard. The other reason is slightly more practical, in that win-lose cricket has a formula for dealing with rain, in that you can use Duckworth-Lewis to provide, to keep it as a genuine win-lose game. I don't actually think that's the reason it's there. I think that's a sort of flip side of it. The main reason we have it where we have it is because that's where the home counties have it. And we look to match them on that. But,
you see my point about how it maximises the number of unconcluded games.
If I was in an argumentative mood, I might pick you up on inconclusive, but I won't, because that would look biased. So I'd like to get as much input on this as we can, because we've had some quite surprising opinions across the course of the forums, or surprising in the sense of I didn't expect them to come from where they came from. But, something well.
Yeah. We personally, the feedback I've got back this year is we don't mind win-lose. We don't mind win-lose-draw. We don't really understand why there is both. Certainly in the lower divisions, either a season full of win-lose or a season full of win-lose-draw. We don't mind, but it's two sets of rules to understand, not just for the players, but the umpires. We've had several cases of umpires calling no balls because there's been 6 players on the leg side. Various different little tiny tweaks to the rules. I think for everyone concerned, certainly probably below 4, division tier 4, just win, lose, or win, lose, draw, whichever league decides. But I don't understand why the division, the season is split up. Just makes no. I just don't understand the reason behind it, to be honest. But
just to give a bit of history, we moved to split season because of the response, primarily those teams who had aspirations to be in the home counties, and they were playing that format, and they felt they were disadvantaged when they went into the home counties, not having played both formats. And I believe the very first year we did this in divisions 1 to 3.
I think the first year we only did it in Division 1. Then we did it in Divisions 1 to 3.
And then actually the membership came back and said, actually, we quite like this. It's a bit of variety, a bit of change. Why don't we do it all the way down? And that's when we moved to doing it all the way down. So there's a bit of history, and that's not saying that's right, wrong, or anything else. The history is we moved to it primarily to support those aspirational clubs. The teams that played it said, oh, we quite like this, and therefore, why don't we play it all the way down? So we did.
Just picking up Sunningwell's idea about playing a full season of win, lose, draw, we will then have to probably pay for Daniel's counselling at that point. But,
I mean, we decided as a club, as a team, as a first team, that no matter what the situation of the game, we were going to try and win it.
Well,
whether we were 9 wickets down in the first 3 overs, it made no difference. We weren't going to bat out a draw. We were going to try and win the game.
That's absolutely the right mentality. I fully endorse that, and I did check. You didn't have any draws last year, did you? So
I mean, Daniel,
one way or another.
No, Daniel was against win, lose, draw, but managed to decide to bat out for a draw. Maybe he should just gone for the win.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it's almost exactly true in every division. There's a couple of anomalies, that the teams who win more games are the teams at the top, and we give all these points. We haven't talked about bonus points and all the rest of it tonight, but actually, if you scrap bonus points and gave 2 points for a win and 1 point for a draw, every single division, bar possibly one, would be exactly the same as they are now. So if you win games, you will be higher up the division. It's absolutely the mentality to turn up to every game of cricket for.
Again, we're not against win, lose, draw or win, lose, draw.
No. It's just
I would personally like one format, whichever the league decides to be. That's cool with me.
And that definitely is more pertinent in the lower tiers, where, like it or not, whilst with every effort to sort of get club umpires and whatever, the level of knowledge of the game probably is a bit lower, and the level of investment into kind of understanding the laws and stuff like that potentially is a bit lower. More scope for difficulties when you're jumping between sets of rules.
Yeah, agreed. Although, I mean, certainly in our case, I think Ian would concur at Bedlow Ridge. It's a mixture of those who probably know too much about the rules and those who don't know anything about them at all.
Yeah.
There's a split between the team, and maybe it's
those that think they do and actually don't.
Well, that's a completely different category altogether, but there's a big majority of those, I suspect. So maybe it's incumbent upon those who do to encourage those who don't, but it's a tricky one.
Okay, I'm going to go to Jimmy, and then I'll come back to you, Daniel.
Yeah, I'm sort of with a bit with Sunningwell. Like, could play. Why have both formats lower down in the divisions? I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense. But then also, I'm probably more on the win-lose side. But then that's all I've ever played, So until this season, But on the other side, if there's not that many draws, then what's the point in having win-lose draw? If not many of that draws are played out in the lower divisions.
You could argue that one both ways, of course. If there's not many draws, what's the argument against having that type of cricket? And there were about 14% of the games that were win, lose, draw went to being a draw. No, not very many. About one per division per week. Because there's a lot to be gained from a youngster, as Steve Daniels alluded to. Saving a game. That's much better than having a net when you need 150 off the last 10 overs, and the result was determined 2 hours.
Oh yeah.
There's a huge amount for people to take out of that game. That if you can say a game's boring, well, to be honest, if the first team scored 450 and you're 25 for 4, that game's incredibly boring. You all know the result, which you may or may not like, but it's a really dull afternoon after tea. You might as well go home, because you know what's going to happen. If you have to take 10 wickets, you don't know what's going to happen.
Correct. Daniel, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you might not know what's going to happen, but you're going to get a very frustrating and annoying afternoon. I mean, I think they're both boring. I mean,
is taking wickets annoying? I don't know.
One-sided game is always boring, and that's why you have differences between the divisions. But the point about having a split series of win-lose and win-lose draw within the season is we may have got away with it this year that the same results will be whether it's win-lose and win-lose draw. But 1 year and for one division, that won't be the case. And I would certainly feel very aggrieved if I was done out of a position by the fact that the lottery landed different teams with different.
But you're making the number of draws is consistent for all the years we've played it.
Yeah.
So if there's one division where that happens, then you can't change necessarily the rules for 18 divisions because one division happens to have a couple of teams that don't want to win games.
Consistent rules rather than switching. I see no advantage to having two different systems within the same divisions.
You learn more skills.
Well,
yeah, I think
100%, Gary. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah, this one will rattle on for sure. What has been interesting across the 4 forums is that there has been a wide spectrum of opinion on it. And as I said, I was quite surprised at some of the comments that were coming, particularly from some of the OCA clubs who sort of started the season saying, don't fancy this draw cricket, and by the end come back and said, I can see some interesting aspects to it.
And to be fair, I was amazed when our poll came back, because certainly the 67 were more vocal.
You do tend to, well, in my notes from the first 3, I think I can quote you here what I've written. The anti-draw brigade were vehement and loud, but not always in the majority. So it's a dearly held opinion. It's not perhaps as broadly held as we thought it might have been. But we need to get that input. We need to understand what, because at the end of the day, we're not here to tell you what cricket you have to play. We're here to provide the cricket that people want to play.
And what are you, as the organiser of the league, proposing to do from now? I mean, do you want us to raise a motion? Are you going to raise a motion?
I can't really say what we will do yet. We will bring together all of the feedback from the forums. The basic principle behind these forums is that if we sit down with all the clubs and we get a huge groundswell of opinion, not on this, but on anything, then we as a committee can say, well, we've got a very clear mandate here to put a proposal to the AGM to change from where we are to where people say they want to be. If it's not a huge groundswell, then our position would normally be the status quo. There is the option for clubs to present motions to the AGM. In order to be able to do that, you need to have a motion which is appropriately written, i.e. doesn't run roughshod over 90% of the rest of the rules, is competent and is supported by 1/4 of the club membership. Now, if you get that and that comes into me before the 30th of September, it automatically makes the AGM papers. What we've said on, or what I've said on all of these forums, is if you do have something, before you go to the bother of writing it out in detail, and if you haven't written many before, it's not quite as simple as it sounds, and then getting 22 clubs to support it, which is what you'll need, speak to us, because we may have taken the opinion and said, well, actually, we're going to propose this or this, and that will save you a lot of work. If you're not comfortable with what we're suggesting, then each club is at liberty to make a proposal. 22 clubs support sounds like a lot, but at the end of the day, if you can't get 22 clubs to support it, you're never going to get 50 clubs to support it at the AGM. So, and otherwise, we would, if we said 5 clubs, we'd end up with an AGM that went on for 3 days. Well, everybody proposed this, that, the other, and so on. We will have a much better idea by Friday, because we'll have summarized all of the meetings. We will speak as a committee tomorrow night and say, okay, where do we think that we ought to be looking at any amendments in whatever part of either the rules or the constitution, and then we'll start to draft them. But that will give the clubs 2 weeks to to look at what if they want to draft something for themselves. And as I say, I fell foul of this myself before I was on the committee. I drafted a long and complex rule amendment, submitted it to the club secretary, and he sent me back the one that they had already drafted for the AGM, which was almost word identical. So I've done all the work for no reason. So it's definitely worth working out. And you can get that information by coming directly to me, and I will be brutally honest with you. If you want to know what the chances are of us doing this, that, or the other, I'll tell you exactly what we're intending to do. Because by the time the papers come out, it's too late. You can't just stand up at the AGM and go, I suppose we all get 50 bonus runs if our club name begins with W, or whatever. David, I've got a hand up from you.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much I'll probably say tonight, but firstly, Stanton Harcourt, all the guys have really enjoyed the season, and I think the amalgamations work well, and very appreciative of all the efforts the committee have put in to make that work. But on this one subject, a win, lose, draw, they are very adamant they don't like it. So that's just to let you know where Stanton Harcourt stand on this issue.
Okay. Anyone else on the win, lose, draw? There's a couple of other things I'd like to just float. Length of matches. Now, these do tie in a little. We did get a few comments from people, particularly in Tier 8, who said, don't have a problem with win, lose, draw, except it's quite hard to bowl people out in 40 overs. And then a couple of other teams came back and said, it's quite hard to survive 40 overs. So there was some split opinion. We felt we were close, if not bang on, with 100 overs, tiers 1 to 5, 45 overs, tiers 6, 7, and 80 overs or 40 overs in tier 8. Now, as I mentioned earlier, with the addition of a second division in tier 3, there is a kind of more natural line now between tiers 4 and 5. And there has been several comments from tier 6 clubs moving up to tier 5 that their biggest concern was moving up to 100 overs. Any thoughts on how long the games should be, could be, might be, notwithstanding 19 rollovers, Neil? So.
Yes. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. What do we think? Too long? Too short?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah. We following last year's games where they were all 40 over games, and the evenings were available for people to spend with their family or their spouses. Games starting at 12 and finishing, which allowed you the evenings. Certainly, with our second team in Division 5, I think the more serious cricketers in 1 to 4, that's fine. But certainly from 5 down, we got a groundswell of opinion that we would prefer a win-lose from Division 5, plus the fact of having reduced overs. That's 40 overs. That was that would leave the evenings clear, because the world has changed in the last 2 years.
Okay.
So that's the opinion from Twyford second team. The first team were obviously adamant they wanted to remain the 50 over cricket.
Yeah.
Just on that one quickly, Mike.
Yeah.
How do you then solve the challenge of when you get second team players who need to move up to first team?
Well, I think they have to accept that the fact that when they move up, then there's more serious cricket, and they have to go with the 50 over cricket. But I umpired some games that went on till 8:15, 8, and I wasn't at home until I mean.
But why?
Because an extra 12 overs, put on an awful long time onto the game. And also it was a win-lose-draw game, and the side were batting it out and taking bloody ages to bat out. But
I would argue that if they're not hitting the ball off the squares, bowl you over much quicker than if it's in the hedge.
Yeah. Well, I'm just telling you what happened in the,
Yeah, no, I just,
the
Neil,
consensus
you expressed an
is
interest there. Why?
the consensus is that people with commitments and girlfriends and boyfriends and husbands and wives and whatever have had their evenings, and now they can't because games are taking them too long, and certainly win, lose, draw games are taking too long. So our consensus was 40 overs from Division 5 down, win, lose.
I just say that was exactly what all 4 of our teams came back with.
Okay.
I could honestly say, I love you to bits, Robbo, but I'm not having any of that. As far as we're concerned at Banbury, keep the games as they are. If they could go back to draw cricket across the board, we'd be happy with that. And if people are worried about going out with their girlfriends at 5 o'clock, I suggest they do something else on Saturday, frankly, because that's drinking time surely after the game, isn't it? Crack on. What's up? What's up with everybody?
I knew you were going to say that, Megas.
I do love you.
I'm just making a note here. Banbury are proposing timed cricket, 20 overs from 9 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly it.
Okay. Anything else on Len?
Yeah, Ian, I played down in 8C this year, and 40 overs is perfectly long enough. It's because when you've got a number of youngsters and you've got to stick to bowling regulations as well, if it's any longer than that, it's hard to fiddle them round because they can only bowl. Some of them can only bowl 6 overs in a spell, or even 5.
Yeah.
So, but I wouldn't want to go lower than 40 overs aside.
Okay. I think I would just bring back Gary's point here that, and I take your point in Tier 8, and that was part of the plan initially, that Tier 8 should be a 40 over league. But where you have clubs with 3-4 teams, or particularly clubs with 2 teams, one in Tier 8 and one in Tier 4, there aren't many, but suddenly you're going to take someone out of that team playing 40 over cricket and throw them into playing 100 over cricket. And there are a lot of, if you look at Tier 5 in particular, there's 16 teams in Tier 5 who are second teams or third teams, or I don't think it's a fourth, 2 teams who play above that. And so if you reduce Tier 5 to 40 over cricket, you're going to be taking kids out of, well, kids or adults or whatever, you're going to be taking them out of 40 over cricket one week and putting them into 100 over cricket the next week. Now, within the clubs, that may create more of an issue. Where it's an isolated within the teams, when we're talking about aspirational teams, yeah, you get a year to think about the fact that you're going to be playing longer cricket, etc., etc. When you're talking about bringing a player up, you get 3 days to think about it, because he gets selected on Wednesday and suddenly he's playing 50 over a side rather than 40 over a side. But just put that in for balance rather than anything else.
Maybe there's a bridge in there, at the moment. Obviously, I think Divisions 6 and 7 play 45 overs.
That's right. That's exactly.
Well, that's exactly why it's there. That's exactly why it's there, to bridge between short form cricket and long form cricket. Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big point here, which is for everyone to consider. Do we have a big jump between Divs 4 and 5, or do we have several jumps between the divisions? And whether it's win, lose, draw, whether that's number of overs, or whether it's panel umpires or not. The question is whether you have an age of consent between the divisions, or whether you have a staggered series of changes, and that's the real big decision.
Yeah, and I think in the past, it's no secret the way we have done it as a staggered formula. That's how we've gone in the past. That's always how the Charwell League ran previously. That it got more and more serious in probably 2 or 3 steps as you moved up towards Division 1. Okay. Just going to throw this one out. Just talk a little bit earlier about consistency and changes in rules and so on. Assuming for a moment that we are still playing win, lose, draw cricket, should win, lose, draw cricket in the lower divisions adopt the same rules as the higher divisions. We currently have 45-45 in where you're playing 90 over cricket. It's 45 overs either side, win, lose, draw. Above that, it's 100 overs, but you can bat through to 53. If you bowl them out early, you get the extra overs, etc., etc. Would it make more sense to scale the whole thing but keep the rules exactly the same? I may choose. Oh, Paddy, you've got a hand up.
Ian, there is part of me that thinks that there's too many chopping and changing. I personally don't get why in the win, lose, draw games in Division 2, for argument's sake, they play with a circle, but lower down we don't play with a circle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would be for trying to get it more the same all the way through, because if you are getting people chopping and changing between divisions, you know, when they're going from a thirds up to a seconds, they're having to understand different rules.
Okay. Okay. Daniel, I'm never sure if that's a legacy hand or a new hand.
I'm terrible with my legacy hands. It's coming down again.
Okay.
Sorry.
What have I got here? I've got Sunningwell.
Yeah, hi. A couple of years back, I had a spare bit of time and worked out that we normally play, we were playing the 45 over matches, which is obviously 90, a maximum of 90 overs. But I worked out that the average game was only 81 overs.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, you know, we're always talking about maximum amount of overs. These games very rarely go maximum length. So I think the 45 overs works well with certainly the level we play at. I wouldn't want to see Division 6, 7 dropping down to 40. I think it maybe work well for the lower division, the lowest division. But I think that stepping stone up, I think works well.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we got some thumbs up. No more hands up. Okay, gentlemen, those are all the things that we wanted to talk about. We've probably included a lot of what you want to talk about, but this is your show. So if anyone has anything else they'd like to throw in that we've not included on the agenda, I promise you we didn't do it on purpose. Now's your time. Patrick.
It's not from me, but Tom Welsh put something in the chat. He's obviously left now.
I saw that, yes. Yes. About players playing down from home counties. All I'd say on that one is we had a quite productive conversation with one of the other home counties clubs on one of the forums, and the net result was they were going to go away, talk to the other home counties clubs, and see if they could find a solution that they felt was better than the one that was in place. The one that's currently in place was put in because the home counties felt that the one that was there before didn't work, and they liked this one much better. Now they don't like it; they want another one, which is fine. You know, our job is not to stop people playing cricket, but at the same time, we are also conscious that a player who has played 16 games in the home counties could make a horrible mess of a lower division if he was dropped down and allowed to influence a promotion relegation situation. We have a couple of possible solutions, which we're going to discuss with them. I think for the majority of the league, this is one that they kind of go, whatever, it doesn't really affect us until it affects us. So we're going to talk to the home counties clubs individually. Currently, it's very simple. If you've played more games in the Cherwell League than you have in the home counties, then you can play in the Cherwell League in the last 2 weeks. If you played more games in the home counties, then you can't, which I think is not unreasonable, but you're never going to find
appeal that though, can't they?
Sorry?
The clubs can't appeal that.
We've not tended to entertain appeals on home counties players. Within the Cherwell League, if you've had a player who's played is not technically qualified to play in your 2s, 3s, 4s, whatever, and come to us and say, look, he's been injured half the season, he hasn't bought a run all year, then we will normally take a look at it and say, yeah, it's fine.
There were vast amount of exceptions for Cherwell League players, but the gap, particularly between Division 1 of the home counties and Division 3 of the Cherwell League, is such that we have taken a stance over the last 3 years now that there won't be any exceptions. I mean, especially based on the fact that that rule that they have was voted in only 3 or 4 years ago. And it seemed to be voted in until it didn't affect, or till it did affect them, and then they wanted to change it. But we've been very consistent. No home counties teams have had any exceptions this year, last year, or the year before.
And I would just add, those rules came into place because a slightly more lenient rule was flagrantly abused in previous year, where a side who was sat slap bang in the middle of the home counties Division 1 dropped 4 or 5 players into their second team who were competing for promotion in Division 3 and battered the opposition. And that's not really in the spirit of cricket.
And that wasn't a one-off.
No, I mean, that happened on a number of occasions.
And we had a request this year for somebody, or they've played their whole season in the home counties. Could they just play the last couple of weeks in Division 3? Well, no, Division 4, in fact, it was. Didn't seem entirely reasonable, really. If you're out of form in the home county Division 1, that doesn't necessarily mean you're out of form in Division 4A or 4B or 5A or something.
So yeah, I have seen that, and I've got a recording of the chat, Patrick. So I will go back to Tom and I think 2 or 3 of the others who have raised it and say, look, if you've got a better solution, we are more than happy to look at it. But ideally, we'd like it to be one that you don't complain about in 14 weeks' time, because that tends to be the way that unfolds. Anyone else? I thought I had 2 hands up, but I think the other one's disappeared. Oh. If we're all good, gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much for coming on. These forums are absolutely essential from our point of view to get the drift of the clubs and what people want to do. You will see what comes out of it from our side in terms of amendments, if we feel that there's a strong enough swing towards them. And as I say, if you have your own ideas or things that you would like to see put in front of the clubs, the mechanism is there. If you have any problems with it, speak to me and I'll make sure that you're guided through what you need to do. And I think the next time we will see you will probably be at the AGM in sometime 25th, I think, of November. But just to be clear, if you do want to get anything on those papers, it has to be with us by the 30th of September. So unless anyone's thought of anything in the last couple of minutes, I will say thank you very much for your time and enjoy your cricket-free winter. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Ian.
Okay, torture.
Oh, went quite well.
I can still hear you, Neil.
Ian,
Jim,
just a quick one. Tomorrow night, I'm potentially going to be traveling down to Chichester tomorrow, late afternoon, evening. So I might be a bit late.
Okay.
If I'm not late on it, it might be that I have to do it just directly off my phone. So could you just send me a link for the meeting tomorrow to my email so I can just keep it on my phone so I can link straight in from my phone if I need to?
No problem. Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. I will catch up with you tomorrow.
Okay, mate. Cheers, Jim.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Right. And I shall see you tomorrow.
Indeed. Yes.
I sent that cup thing to everybody because I
saw
thought
that,
it'd be better if they saw it beforehand than coming cold. Dave Warner's going to speak about the leagues, which is a slightly different thing, but we'll cover all that tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I sort of summarised the first three on a document today.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much really to add from tonight.
I think they've been fairly consistent, haven't they?
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't think there's much we're going to be changing.
No, I think there's.
I'm still recording, by the way.
Oh, right, yeah, hang on, I'm not that one.